Baruch we begin Perek Shiva Asa, the 17th Perek in Hilchos Ishut, the laws of marriage, in the Sefer Nashim. The Rambam continues the theme of the previous Perek regarding the woman collecting her ksuba, specifically if she collects her ksuba with other claimants, and additionally regarding the sale of the ksuba. Some of these the Rambam is going to speak about in this Perek is the Rambam is going to explain the halacha of kedemes, regarding the woman that got married first, regarding the ability to first have the geviyah, the collection of the ksuba, regarding certain tainas, claims regarding the nichsit and basel, the properties that the woman brings into the marriage that the husband takes responsibility for, regarding if the husband leaves over nashim rabbis, many wives, and you don't have enough monies to collect all the ksubas, halacha of ariv, a guarantor as it applies to the ksuba of isha, the halacha of macher baila, if the husband sells the properties with her acquiescence, her acceptance, the sale of the lands l'tzarech ksubasa for the need of her collection of her ksuba, and the halacha of mecheres, of selling or mecheles, or if she is meichel, if she waives her rights to her ksuba. So we begin halacha aleph. The Rambam opens up with the order of precedence regarding who gets to collect their ksuba or their obligations from the husband, as the Rambam begins. Mishayu nasei nashim rabbis b'meis. Someone was married to many women, and he passed away. So kol shenisas b'tchila, whoever got married first, which the date of their ksuba was earlier than all the other women's ksubas, kedemis litu ksubasa. So her rights come first, and she's the first to collect her ksuba. Now, ve'enachas mehen netelas el b'shvu. But however, none of the women could collect without taking an oath, and that's even if the orphans are not making them take an oath. Still, the first woman to collect has to swear to the second woman, because the second woman could claim, swear to me that you have not collected anything from our husband yet, because maybe there's not going to be left anything for my ksuba. And so to the second woman to the third to the fourth, and so on and so forth, for that same exact reason. Now, and the last woman standing only has left what the previous one left over them. Now, but however, even the last one, she also has to swear. Why would she swear? She's the last one collecting. Because maybe it's going to turn out that one of the prior collected fields were actually stolen from one of the prior women, which was not really the husband's, because he stole it. Comes out that the real owner is going to take it away. Now, so although, yes, what's the difference? So the earlier wife is going to take it from the later one, but however, she could still claim they want the last one to swear, because even though I'm collecting from you, but you know that you might not have it, you're not going to be so careful in taking care of it, and it's going to have a loss, and therefore, from in inception, they make her swear to make sure that she's really getting it appropriately, that it's really hers. And then when they tell us Ashar, and then she goes and she takes what's remaining for her. So that's regarding if there's many different women. But let's say there's also an outstanding debt against the husband who just passed away. So if that debt was prior to these women's ksubas, so the creditor he collects first. Now the ksuba kadma, but if let's say the woman got married first and her ksuba was before this loan happened, then the woman collects first because her lien on the real estate was before the lien of the creditor. But what's left over goes to the creditor. Halacha base. But when we say this, if the real estate that they're coming to collect from was he owned that property at the time he got married and the time they took the loan from the creditor. Husha did nice, and that's what the halacha is. Like we said in halacha aleph, their web's document is first, then their zachat, then they have the rights first. But the Rambam explaining but let's say he married women consecutively, and he borrowed, and so whether this was before that the loan was before they got married or after, it doesn't make a difference. But the after all these women that he married and all the loans that he took, only after that he married them and that he borrowed the money, then subsequently Kamakarkas, when he bought this land, which they're all trying to collect from, here they're all going to divide it equally. Because all their liens came at the same time. Why? At the moment that he bought it, you can't have a lien on something he didn't have before he had it. At that moment, he was meshubah to all of them, because at the time he bought the land, he was already obligated to their ksubas and his loan, and it's all happening at the same time. When he buys it, so therefore income then kadim, and here there's not going to be any laws of who comes first, where that's obviously where the properties are sufficient. But if it's not sufficient, Actually, we'll see later on Halacha Daled that actually the lender is before the woman and she gets rejected. But if there's enough, who is in the order of precedence, it's not going to be in an order like we say whoever's document is first. Here, they're all going to get it equally. Halacha Gimel. Another similar case when there's no order is if the dates of the ksubas and the documents all have the same date. Or they have the same hour, but in places where there's certain places that they write actually hours when it happened. Then they all divide it equally as one. Because there's no one that has precedence. Now, but however, says Ram, it always is that whoever goes and merits first by a movable item that's from the deceased estate, according to their debt, or according to their ksuba, then we don't take it away from them. Because there's never a kedima, there's no one getting first by movable items, because movable items are not meshubed to a creditor. Because had they been meshubed, then a person would never buy anything from his friend because, I don't know, this might be meshubed to someone else, and there's no word out there that they know to be careful. By real estate, there's a lien on this, you could know, but movable items not, so there's no shibud on metalton, and therefore, you can't say that you had an earlier shibud because there is no shibud, and therefore whoever gets it first gets to keep it. Halacha Dal. Mishiger says whoever divorces his wife, v'lov shtar chayiv, and on him, on the garish, the one who did the divorce, has an outstanding debt. Now, to this one who just divorced his wife, there's a creditor and his wife are trying to collect. Now, he has monies and he has real estate according to the amount of the debt and the ksuba. So the creditor, he takes monies because he borrowed money, he should pay back money. Tells ksuba min karka. The woman, however, she collects her ksuba from the real estate because she didn't give anything and she's only relying on real estate, which you always know it's always going to be. There's never going to get lost. Now, if he only has real estate, where there's not enough for both of them to collect, and there was no order of preference. In other words, where the date of the ksuba and the document was the same day, or he first got married and he borrowed and then he bought the land. So in this case, we said that if the woman is first, so then she gets first. But if they're equal, so everything's standing, then you're going to give it to the creditor and not to her. If something's left over for the woman, fine, she should take. She's going to be rejected in the face of the creditor. The reason for this is because the creditor, he has a loss, he gave his money to this borrower. But the woman is not missing anything. What'd she give? Herself, to get married. But more than the man wants to get married, the woman wants to get married. So again, if her ksuba was before, then like we said in Halacha Alf, she's going to get first. But if it's at the same date, there's no earlier shibud, and then there's not enough for both of them, then the Balchev is going to get it, not the one. Halacha Hey, so too regarding someone who died, and even though in this situation we don't really have to give the benefit to the creditor, because you don't have to be concerned that this is going to cause people to stop lending because death is not so common, and you would not, the lender won't think that, I'm not going to lend money because maybe the borrower is going to die, and then the woman's going to have to, his wife's going to divide it with me. Even so, the Rambam tells us, even in this situation, the money gets rejected because ultimately the lender is the one who has a loss. So if someone dies, so that's what the v'chein mishames, because we just spoke about when he divorces. So if he dies, and again he leaves over a wife with her ksuba and a creditor, and it's a land where there's no order of a preference, no one comes first. Again, as we explained, whatever the situation is, because they were at the same day. So the woman gets rejected in the face of the creditor, and he collects his debt first. Now, halacha alf, it says the Rambam, but once the Ga'in went and instituted, which we quoted in the previous parak, in halacha zayin, that women and creditors could collect from the movable items of Yisayim. Now it's known, as we mentioned this before in halacha gimel, that there's no order of first in regards to movable items. So if he didn't leave over enough movable items so that should be enough for both of them to collect, so we first give it to the creditor his debt first, as we said in the prior halachas. Now if there's something left over the woman that she could collect for her ksuba, then titil she could take from lav. If not, tidacha, she's going to be rejected. Now halacha zayin, The Rambam continues, let's say in her ksuba was written another element, which we already mentioned from the Rambam, that's not really the ksuba per se, it's really the nedunya. Nichsei term basel, the properties of the iron sheep, which is her properties that she brings into the marriage, and the husband has a responsibility for that he's going to insure. Now, additionally, Vitana, she claims that the husband lost it, or he took it and he used it. So then it's the halachic status of her nechsed term basel, which is like any debt. It's not just like a regular ksuba, which we're giving the preference to the Baal Chayiv. She's also like a Baal Chayiv. It's also something that's a loss of hers. So so she swears that she did not take them, that she didn't give it to him, and she didn't waive her rights to it to her husband. And here she has equal standing, and she divides with all the other creditors, where again it's not like the halacha of the ksuba, but rather like some other debt, because here it is a loss of money for her. Now in halacha ches, the Rambam continues regarding dividing up the husband's estate without a kedimus, without the order of one before the other. As the Rambam says, mishames. In other words, how to qualify, how to do this. Mishames, someone passes away, or gerish, or he divorces. V'yesh Nashim Rabbah says many wives. V'anchem din kedima, as we mentioned, it's going on where there's no order. Where again, either they got all married at the same day and the day of the same, or the only thing that's left over is metaltlin, which does not have a din of kedima. But be that as it may, there's no din kedima, so you can't say who goes first. But now there's not enough in the estate here to pay all the ksubas. So case in Hachalikas, how do they divide it? So since around like this, right, we see if you're going to divide his estate, his money, with the amount of wives that he has, and you're only going to come to the woman has the lowest dollar amount of her ksuba. The amount of ksuba or even less than that. So in that situation, they're going to divide it equally, where because all the money is a meshubit to each woman, the way it is to all the rest, so each one has equal rights over here in this, because it's not more than anyone's amount. So they each are going to get an equal division in that amount, because each one, no one's getting more than what they're supposed to get, and then we have equal rights in collecting what they need to get collected. So that's if it's not going to be more than any one of the women. So then they'll all get equal amounts according to that ratio. Now, but let's say there was more money than the woman with the least amount. There's not enough for everyone to get what they were promised. Some women were promised $1,000 in their ksuba, some were promised $500, whatever it is, but there's not enough for the sum total. But there is more than the one she was the cheapest ksuba, $100. There's enough for her to get 100 and more. Everyone's going to get more than that amount of 100. So then you divide these monies, so that the one who gets the least should get the amount of her ksuba. That's the first step that you're going to do, and then she's out of the picture because she got what she needs, and everyone's going to get that amount that she was supposed to get. And then you go and you divide again what's left over after she's out of the picture. It starts with the remaining wives, the way you did it the first time. As the Rambam explains, Kate said, how so? So Rambam gives an example. He says, someone's married to 4 wives. The first one was 400. The second one, this guy kept on losing his money. Second wife, by the time he married, or Shleish married 300. The third one, most time 200. Shavis, the fourth one, Meya is 100. Nimtzah kol elef. If you add on all those numbers, comes out that the total amount that he owes to the women are 1,000. Now, begirish kul in the mace, and then he's done. He divorces them all, or he dies. So if he leaves over 400 or less, so this is the case that we said that there's not going to be enough to have more than the cheapest one, because the cheapest one is 100, and you have 4 wives, and there's 400 or less. So here you can divide equally. And each one take 100 or less if you have less than 400, but it's going to be accordingly, because everyone has a right for that amount and more. Now, let's say he left over not just 400, he left over 800. Now the sum total again is 1,000, but he left over 800. So it says the Rambam like this: if you're going to equally divide amongst all the women, nimtzas revis, and it tells them comes out 200 times 4 is 800, and each woman is going to get equal amount. Comes out that the cheapest, the last woman, the fourth one, is going to take 200, but her ksuba is only 100. She's going to be getting more than what she's supposed to. And the kid says, rather, what should we do? And this is really explaining the halacha Rambam already said. What you do is you take 400 zuz, so then you divide it amongst them 100, 100, 100, 100. And nimtzis revi is not the subasa. Comes out that the last woman, she got the amount that she's owed, and she's out of the picture now. Nishakan arba me'ezuz b'shalsham. Now you're left with 400, remaining from the 800, and with 3 women now. Shebiyad kalachs mishloshim me'ezuz. Now each one already has 100 zuz from those 3. Now, if you're going to go ahead and take the remaining 400, divide equally amongst those 3, comes out that the third woman is going to take 233 and a third. If you're going to equally divide that remaining 400 amongst 3, the problem is her ksuba is only 200, not that much. So you do like this. So you take from the 400, 300, and you divide that 300 equally amongst those 3 women. So the third woman, she just added another 100. She got her 200, and she's done. She had a picture. Now she can leave. Now you left with 100, and the first 2 women. Now you divide equally the remaining 100 between the first and the second one. The first woman who was promised a larger amount, she was promised 400, she ends up getting 250. So the second was promised 300, she also gets 250, which both are not yet the amount that they're supposed to get, but they're equal rights on that remaining 100 divided 50-50. And it comes up the third one gets her 200, and the fourth one gets her 100. That's how you're going to divide, even if it's 100 wives. You keep on going according to that amount, cutting out. Whoever gets, again, if it's not enough for any one of them to get what they're supposed to get, you always divide equally, as small as it's going to be. But as long as you have some that it's more than that lowest amount, then you do it in that equal division, as the Rambam had spelled it out. Now the Rambam continues halacha test regarding the woman collecting her ksuba from an ariv, a guarantor, from lekuches, those who bought the incumbent properties that have a shibatar, and that of hektish. As the Rambam says, halacha test. Ha'ariv le'isha b'ksubasa. If a man guarantees the woman by her ksuba, where he tells the woman, look, get married to this guy, and don't worry, you're worried about collecting the ksuba if you get divorced or whatever, I'm guaranteeing that I'll pay if your husband doesn't pay. Says the Rambam, even if they made an acquisition from him to show that he's going to pay, he does not have to pay the ksuba. Because he did a mitzvah by having them get married, and she's not really causing a loss for the woman because she didn't invest any money over here. She just wants that get the ksuba. He's not obligated. Now, but let's say the one who is the guarantor is actually the father. It's the ksuba of his son. And they went and they did a formal acquisition on that. Then the father has to pay because the father, because of his son, he actually does indebt himself, and he's conclusive in that he is going to be head, and he made an actual formal kinyan, and he's going to be obligated. So to a kablan shel ksuba, a kablan is a higher level, as the Rambam explains in Hilchos Halva, that of a certain guarantor. He accepts the responsibility. Ksuba, he has to pay off pishul, even if they didn't even do a kinyan from him. As the Rambam explained, what's a kablan? This someone tells a woman, he nasi lazeh, marry this guy, vani noisin ksuba, and I'm going to give this ksuba. That wording of noisin is a stronger wording, which obligates him even if there was no kinyan. Now, but like we said, if he tells her, I'm a guarantor of this ksuba, I'm going to pay this ksuba, I'm obligated to kids with things like that. Potter is exempt, unless, as we said, if he was his father. Now, because of this obligation of the arv, says the Rambam Hamagarsha sister, if someone divorces his wife, yadirena hana, he has to go ahead and take a vow forbidding him to have hana, pleasure from her, al das rabim, so that you can't even make for such a neder. Only then could she collect the ksuba if it's from the kablan, or from his father if he was the arv. The reason is he might remarry his wife. On the Chazar comes out they really just did a trick, some subterfuge to be able to get the assets because the couple's poor. They say, you know what? I'm going to divorce you. I don't have what to pay. We're going to go to my father, go to the kablan, and he's going to have to pay your ksuba, and then we'll get married. We'll have money. So to avoid that, he has to take a neder of another, so he's not going to be able to remarry her. Halacha yud. And the same thing applies to somebody who made all his properties, or from his properties, as hektish. And then he divorces his wife. He has to first take a vow forbidding him to have pleasure from his wife, which would be impossible, they're married. And only then could she collect from the one who redeemed that item that her husband was makdish, because from hektish itself, she cannot collect. Because that's halacha that hektish precludes all liens that it previously had in it. Unless if the treasure sold from the hektish, this land, and it went out to chulin, then the woman could collect from the one who redeemed it because her lien is on the land. Because it could be compared to two people that bought where she said to the first one, I have no rights with you, but then that person sold to the second one. She could collect from the second one because she only said she doesn't have with the first one. That's like what Hektish is, but then the one who bought from Hektish, she could collect with. But again, as long as he first took a neder no from her, Shemayasa couldn't know Hektish because he might be making a trick on Hektish just as a way of getting back what her husband was a Maktish. Now, but let's say he's divorcing his wife, and she's coming to collect from the people who bought his properties from him, not from the Ariv and not from Hektish, rather from the Kuchas. There we don't obligate him to make a neder forbidding benefit from his wife. Rather, his wife could swear and collect. And if she wants to, she can go back to her husband. And the reason is the consumers, they knew that there's a lien of the wife's ksuba, and they caused a loss to themselves. That they bought property that was with their lien, and therefore it's their loss, and therefore he doesn't have to take a neder. She could collect, and he could remarry her. The Ram continues regarding the husband who sells these nechasim meshabadim, these properties that have a lien, to other people that are meshabed to his wife's ksuba. Says the Ram, habal shemach nechasim. If the husband sells from his estate, which, as we've been saying all along in the previous parak, that the wife has a lien on all his properties, and then after he sold these properties, the wife wrote to the consumer, don't worry, I know I have a lien on the properties. Litigation and complaints I don't have with you, meaning I'm not going to come and try to claim it from you. And in other words, and the wife essentially was agreeing to the actions of the sale. Says the Rambam, even if they went and made a kinya formal acquisition on it, yes, you have no rights on us. When she leaves the marriage, she could still go ahead and collect her ksuba from that lekech. Why? Because she didn't write this to the consumer. Only that there shouldn't be any discord between her and her husband. And she could say, I was just trying to be pleasing to my husband because he's going to be upset that say, oh, people don't want to buy from me, oh, they're worried that you're going to collect the ksuba. But until the time of the collection, most definitely the sale is valid. And there are actual properties that are right away, however, void, which if, let's say, he sells land which are the ones that the wife had been specified for the ksuba, so that would not be allowed at all. Here, we're saying it is a valid sale, but ultimately she could collect from there because she could claim that I didn't really. I know I did a kinyan, I know I wrote that or whatever, but it's only because I didn't want my husband to be upset at me. Now, that's only in the order that it was, that he sold it first and then she wrote this. Because he already did the sale, and then she's like, okay, yeah, I agree also. But let's say the consumers, they first went to the wife, and they acquired her from her first. That she's not going to lean over here, but she's not doing any favor to her husband. Her husband didn't even sell anything yet. And after that, she told the consumers, yeah, I have no lien, it's okay, and they did an acquisition. And then the husband sells it. Says here, she cannot collect from it because she can't say I did a favor to my husband because she gave it to them before her husband even sold it. And another case is, so too if the husband first sold, and he told his wife, do me a favor, I need to be able to sell real estate. Everyone's afraid that you're going to collect. You have a huge ksuba. Write to lekech, didn't dvam ainli imach. Write to that consumer a document. I have no liens on you. Vulikasa, and she didn't write. And she did not agree to what he was doing. Because the sale went under. It didn't go through because no one wanted to buy it. And then another time subsequently, the husband went and sold the property to someone else. Whether it's that field or some other field. After the husband sold his scheme of the woman was in agreement with that action, and they made a formal acquisition on the wife that she has no lien on this field. Then after the marriage is over, she could not collect from it. Because here she cannot say, I was just doing a favor to my husband. The first time around, when she didn't want to, she wasn't appeasing her husband, and she stood her ground and she didn't. So you see, when she did agree, was not for her husband, was for herself, and therefore, here she cannot collect. Halachiyat base. If someone had two wives, and the first one got married before the second one, and he sold their fields. Now, the consumer went to the first wife, and he acquired it from her, that she has no lien on this field. And she's not going to grab it from the consumer. And it was an effective kinyan, meaning that they acquired it from her first, and then from the husband, which we said that is a valid kinyan. Where she cannot claim anymore, where I did it as a favor to my husband. because, again, they acquired from her first before they bought from the husband. Now, and then subsequently the husband died or he divorced both of them. So what happens is like this. The second wife could remove from lekech. They didn't acquire from her that she's not going to have a lien on the consumers. They only went to the first wife. Now, the thing is, once the second wife removes it from lekech, the first wife now takes it away from the first one, because her lien on the properties come first. And she didn't remove her lien only from the consumer. But on the second wife, she still has it. Now the problem is, but now when the field goes to the first wife, then the consumer goes and collects it from her. Because he already acquired from her the rights on this field that she's not going to go take it from him. And this keeps on going around in the circle until they make some type of a compromise, because it keeps on going around and around and around, because the second wife takes from the consumer and the first wife from the second wife, and then the consumer from the first wife, and so on and so forth. So they do this until they find the compromise. Now, Halach Yud Gimel, the Rambam continues on when the woman is selling the husband's estate for the collection of her ksuba. Halach Yud Gimel, Almana, widow, bein min nesuin, bein min erisin, whether from marriage she was widowed or whether from halachic engagement. Halach is nishbas, as we said in the previous parak, she first swears that her husband did not leave her anything from the ksuba, and that she still owed it. Umecheres mekarka bala, and she could sell from her husband's land. V'nefras ksubasa, and then she could collect her ksuba. And this is bein bevez mumchen, whether with a professional court, bein bevez she'in mumchen, whether with a court that's not made up of professionals, because a husband is okay. He doesn't want that his wife should be disgraced in the courts, and he's okay if it's even a non-official court. Now, but this is at least that these three men who make up this mock court should be trustworthy, three trustworthy people, and they should know about how to evaluate real estate. And also, the liability, the insurance of the sale is on the orphan's estate. Meaning if something turns out that it was not really, it was something wrong with the sale, and it was stolen, so that's not her fault. Although she's selling it, she's just an agent for the orphans, and the liability is on the estate of the orphans. Now, this is all regarding a widow. Al-Hagrusha, but a divorcee, she could only sell it in a real bona fide court, because it doesn't bother a person so much if his divorcee gets disgraced by having to come to court, and therefore she has to come to court. Now, whoever sells in court, it can only be sold where they make an announcement regarding this field that's going to be sold, how much is it worth, why are they selling it. And says the Rambam, in the laws of loans, it's going to explain exactly the order of how the courts sell things. Now, but if she sells it not in a court, then it does not require, meaning those who can do it out of the court, do not have to go ahead and do it with an announcement. But even so, again, but it requires three people that are trustworthy and that they know how to do an evaluation. A widow that sells the land that she needs for her ksuba, that's otar. Now, if she does it let's say she does it by herself, without any court. Even though we said that she can do it with not in court itself, but it has to be some form of a court. And then she's doing it by herself. So, if it turns out that she sold it that exactly the worth of the land, so the sale is valid, and when she has to swear that oath that the widow has to swear, as we mentioned before, after she sold it. But this is only if she sold it to someone else. If she evaluated for herself, saying that I'm owed by the estate $5,000, and she evaluates the land and takes that for herself, that she hasn't done anything. Even if she made an announcement, it's only valid as an agent for the assignment to sell it, but not to take it, and therefore that's not valid. Let's say Ksuba was 200 dinar. Now, what she did was she sold a field that's really worth 100, and she sold it. She got a great deal. She sold it for 200, or the other way around. Shav Mesayim, a field that's worth 200, B'meya, she only got 100 out of it. So in the scalp, either one, in the scalp of Ksubas, she received the Ksubah and she doesn't get anything more. Because either way, she got 200 for the worse. Either she made 200 over 100, but she got her 200, or she took a field that's really worth 200 and she only made 100, and she made a real mistake. But either way, she's getting, or she took 200 from the assignment. Now, as we said, as long as she swears the oath of the widow. Now, let's say her ksuba was 100 dinar. Now, she sold a field that was worth 101 dinner, but she only sold it for 100. So mechabatel. So the sale is void because she sold it less than what it was worth, which is stealing from the orphans, and she only got 100, and she only deserves 100. Now, even if she says I'll return that dinner that I owed to the Yarshim, which is more than was supposed to be. No, even so, sale is void and has no validity whatsoever. Halacha design. His ksubasa arba mea zuz. Let's say her ksuba was 400 zuz. Now she went and she sold 400 worth to one consumer for 100, another one 100, shav b'shava, each one worth 100. But the last one was shava mea v'dina b'mea. The last one, she only got 100, but it was really worth 101 dinner. Shal achar batal, so the last one's going to be void. B'shal kum kain. All the previous ones are valid because they're each one worth 100. She got 300. The last 100, which you're supposed to get for a 400, that last one was really worth a dinner more. Well, that sale is going to be void. Halacha Yitzayin, the Ram continues regarding if she sells her ksuba or if she waives the right to her ksuba. She's meichlet. Halacha Yitzayin, yesh leish alim ksubasa. A woman has the right to sell her ksuba to somebody else, or to gift it to someone else, which is, what happens is, it has no validity, it has no use until the divorce or the husband dies. But if the husband ends up dying or he divorces her, which then she is able to collect her ksuba, so that person will come along and he'll collect because he bought the rights to the ksuba. But if the woman dies when her husband's still alive, or she dies even if the husband died but she didn't swear yet, which she cannot collect until she swears, then the consumer doesn't get anything and he loses money, and that's why again he only gives a little amount for that because it's a risk factor over here. We don't know what's going to happen, but in those cases he's not going to get anything because the woman wouldn't get in those cases either, and he only gets the right that she has. If she sells partial of her ksuba, or partial of her ksuba, she uses as collateral. Or she gives to someone else a part of a ksuba. I have a ksuba of a few $1,000,000. I give you 1 million of it. So still, she can still sell from her husband's land, but to collect the rest. Whether in the court of professionals, or whether, like we said, just that of 3 trustworthy people. And the she could sell her ksuba many times. Whether in the court, and bein b'shleish nemanim, or whether again the 3 trustworthy people, and they know the valuation of the land. In other words, it doesn't have to be all at one point. She could sell the land for the collection of her ksuba over many times. Now, Allah yates hamecheres ksubasa, if a woman sells her whole ksuba, bein lacherim, bein labala, whether to others or whether to her husband. Why she would be selling her ksuba to her husband is if he dies or he divorces her, that she's not going to collect the ksuba. Even though she sold it, so she sold the ksuba, which is the primary ksuba, but she doesn't lose the other stipulations that usually go along with the ksuba. And so to b'mhoila ben zachar, if she had a male son, Yerush keneged ksuba hazeh nimka, he's going to inherit the amount of her ksuba which was sold, even though she sold it. He's going to collect minichsi av from his father's estate, more than his portion of the actual division of the properties, which is which is one of the stipulations that the son gets it. So although she sold it, but that's the ikar ksuba. But one of the tanaim of the ksuba, like mezainis and to redeemer and to refuah, this is one of the tanaim, and that she doesn't lose. That was not given up when she sold the ikar ksuba. Now that's regarding selling it. But if a woman is meichel, she waives her right of a ksuba to husband. She says, it's okay, you don't have to give me a ksuba. Then if the kol tnai ksuba, it's not like just a sale, which is just on the actual ability to collect what's going to happen afterwards. Here she lost all the stipulations of the ksuba. It's like there's no ksuba over here. And she doesn't even have the rights to get sustenance, to get food from her husband. Now, the Rambam explains, and this umechelik ksubasa, when she's meichel her ksuba, in the tzricha kinyan, there's no need for acquisition, you don't need witnesses, like anyone who waives their rights. You don't have to have witnesses, you don't have to have, just if you wanted to prove it, but you don't have to have intrinsically witnesses, not any acquisition. Just by words is sufficient. But this is only this is only if the words are that it makes sense that you can rely on them. Meaning, it can't be just that they were joking around. She said, yeah, okay, I don't need a ksuba. That wouldn't be valid. Or words of wonder, like, wow, I'm not going to get a ksuba? Like, yeah, I'm not going to get a ksuba, like what's called rhetorical. But das rather means with a clear consciousness that she said, and they had a discussion, and she said, I understand, times are hard, etc. It's okay, I'm meichel ksuba. Then is where she loses all the rights in her ksuba.